Hello. So I made a video about well, the fucking touching the phone again. I made a video about the associations with kind of words, and I wanted to kind of expand on that a little bit. Talk about a bit more about it. And one of the kind of obvious ones in my targeting is the word or the colour yellow. So obviously I've said before, you kind of break it down and it makes you or low. That's kind of the association that they want me to make. They've used this at very specific times when they arrested me for communications issues, i.e. I was sending nasty messages to an ex. There was back and forth basically, but they arrested me because mine were a wee bit more fucking out there, rude. Like I've said before, I've spoke about it before, I never threatened anything towards them. I never said anything really outrageous. I was just, I'd had a drink. I don't want to use that as an excuse. It's just a factor in the situation at the time. I'm not excusing my behaviour. It's absolutely wrong and I shouldn't have done it, I got myself into that situation by drinking. But it is what it is, There was nothing too great in it. It seemed really over the top for the fact that they arrested me for it, but such is life, there we go. It played into the situation that they wanted, this was a pre-planned kind of situation that they wanted to have me. I was 42 at the time, I'd never been arrested before, I had no police record. But they wanted it, and they wanted me to have a police record, and they wanted me to have a police record for this specific offence, communications via, telephone or device or whatever. I can't think of the word. I can't think of the exact. I'll try and look it up later and put it in the description. But yeah. So they wanted me to be charged with that specific thing. So when I phoned up, I was still working at the time. This was about 6 months before the targeting went overt. The police were just kind of setting the scene at this point, getting me again to have a record, getting me on the kind of police computers, getting me on the system, involving all the different services, putting me on their radar so that they had some blackmailing power when they eventually went overt with this, with my targeting. But it had been done for years and years previous to this. It's just I'd upset someone, an ex who'd been planted in my life, who's from a very satanically ritual abuse type family, his Freemasonry in his family, etc. So, like I said before, he was paid to be in a relationship with me. He received £10,000 to fake a relationship with me, and they kind of took it too far. So maybe go into that whole story at another time. So when I phoned up the police the day after I was arrested, or a couple of days later, and I was worried about, because I was still working at the time, so I was worried about how it would affect my job. And she said to me on the phone, I wouldn't worry about it, this offence is the lowest of the low. And what I didn't realise at the time was she was talking about me, she was referring to me, and that's what she was kind of calling me, the lowest of the low. Again, it plays into what they were going to accuse me of later on, what they accuse most targets of being some kind of deviance. So that's the phrase that she was using. But yellow, when I was arrested and they obviously took me to the police station, put me in a cell, when they gave me my belongings back, my belongings were tied with a yellow zip tie, and the guy at the desk made sure to mention that I was going to receive a free lovely yellow zip tie, making sure to mention that specific colour, again to play into the whole kind of yellow theme that was going to come about later on, that they use now, yellow, you're low. That's what they want me associated with. That's why they put a lot of yellow cars, vehicles, etc. in my environment. People with yellow suitcases. You can look at my shorts. I don't like to take too many videos of them because I don't like to play into their fucking bullshit or give them too much attention, But that's the whole theme with that, and they'll use it in different ways. They've kind of made sure that they use a lot of kind of anagrams and wordplay in my targeting for me to try and make associations with different words and work them out and twist them round, etc. So they'll use this to their advantage as well, lots of wordplay, lots of kind of anagrams, so they can kind of better hide what it is that they're doing, and it seems like I'm just fucking mad and I'm reading too much into anything, and I'm schizophrenic or whatever the case may be. Also, when I went and stayed with my brother last year, his ex woman. I can't call her girlfriend in all reality because she's like 20 years older. She's like a 60-odd-year-old woman. Even when he first met her, she was in his 40s, so I can't call her his girlfriend. His ex-partner, I suppose. He's still friendly with her. And I went with him to visit her house, and she, well, first of all, when I first got there, I presumed that he was still living with her, so I went to her house, and she came out that it's almost like she'd got an alert that a target was in the area, because as I was walking to her house, and it was late at night, it was about 10:30, 11 at night, and she come out of the door and she was wearing a jacket with sunflowers all over it, again yellow, and they use the sunflower theme quite a lot, they'll kind of sprinkle that around quite a lot all the time, really. It's almost like she'd got a kind of notification that someone was in the area. The fact that she came out of her front door at the exact moment where I was approaching her front door, it was very fucking odd. I found it very odd. She's a very odd woman. But yeah, we went to visit her one day kind of shortly after that, and she said, oh, you won't have any stuff with you, any toiletries with you, and she gave me a pot of Olay face cream, Olay. So if you reverse it like they make me do, because they've got into my brain with this fucking wordplay, making me make these associations, making me build these anagrams. It is ya low, you are low. So that's one of the kind of things that they use. But I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that arrest and the reason that they made it. At the time I had an old iPhone. I had several old iPhones that I no longer used in my house, and they obviously had access to this. They had access to my house. They were coming into my house all the times. But I didn't, it's like old phones, they were just put in a certain place and I didn't really pay much attention to where they were. My Wi-Fi, the password, etc. was just on the back of it. It was set up in my lounge. I had no reason to hide any of this stuff. I didn't realise that anyone was coming into my house. So when the police, etc. came into my house and told me that I was going to be their bitch, basically, they showed me these communications that they'd made with several other people, and there was one about a girl that had died, and the communication between my phone, they had my iCloud, all of my iCloud information, so all this was on there between my iCloud account, so my phone, and her parents, the parents of a dead girl, basically trolling her. They had communications between people that I'd been friends with over the years, basically trolling them, saying kind of disgusting stuff, using my devices that they had access to, that they were accessing, whether they took them away or whether they were using them within my house or whether they'd cloned them. I don't know, like I've said before, I'm not very technical. I spoke before again about a woman named Tara Maguire and how she kind of featured in my targeting. She was put there by kind of social workers. The setup with the police by arresting me, etc., was to get me on some kind of system, and they said, they wanted to kind of play on the fact that I had bad mental health. I didn't have bad mental health, but they wanted to invent that fact to get other services involved. So they got adult social work involved and said that maybe I needed a little bit of help, and so they put me in touch with a charity called SAMH, SAMH, and that's apparently who Tara Maguire worked for. And she was like a peer support worker, and then she started coming out with a sob story after talking to her. I was very isolated, that she had nowhere to live, and I offered her to move into my house, which she did. But again, it was just a big setup. It was to get her in my environment. It was to get these services. It was to get me a criminal record. It was to get me on the record of all these services, to get paperwork going, to look like I had bad mental health, to look like I was a criminal, to look like I had, previous for sending shitty communications to people, that I was a troll, that I was sending stuff to parents of dead children, which I would never fucking do. But anyway, one day when Tara Maguire was living in my house, which was about 2 weeks before I told her to fuck off, a fucking smelly rat, I got up one morning, I was out in the garden having a cigarette, and she'd said about someone that she knew, this woman that she knew was trolling her friend, they'd been friends with her, and she decided to go against them, and now she was, now because they'd fallen out, she was trolling her friend and setting up fake names, fake accounts in her friend's name, and sending her friend nasty messages, and that she'd had enough of it because it was happening again last night. There was another account set up last night, and she just had enough of it. So while I was in the garden having a cigarette, Tara, on her own mobile phone, phoned the police. And I could hear her, she made sure that I overheard, and she was saying, yeah, this woman's setting up accounts for my friend all over the place and all these different names, and you know, she's trolling my friend and saying the most disgusting things, and my friend hasn't been well lately. And yeah, I mean, this woman's just not right in the head. She has children, you know, she should know better. There's something really seriously mentally wrong with her. She really needs some kind of help, you know. And she's saying all this, and I thought nothing of it at the time. And then that day she said she's going to go back to her house, which apparently she'd been fucking, you know, kicked out of because she hadn't been paying her rent. But she said she still had the keys and they hadn't taken it back yet, so she was going to go back there to a house with no furniture, you know. Again, it doesn't make sense, but, you know, a lot of stuff never really made sense around that time, and I just never questioned it. So she's phoned the police from my house, you know, and even coming out and smirking at me while I'm outside having a cigarette during this phone call, and taking my cigarette out of my hand and taking a draw of it herself, you know, at the time while she's doing this. Well, I realised later, you know, it didn't take me that long to realise later that this was the kind of setup, you know. She's phoning the police from my address. She's obviously the night before has access to my internet, has access to all my old phones. I wasn't using an iPhone anymore at the time. I hadn't for about a year and a half or so. But she's obviously had access to them, obviously going into my iCloud, setting up all these accounts, trolling people that she knows. It turned out this friend of hers is a woman named Lindsay, who I'd met through AA. So Lindsay's number, I didn't know who this Lindsay was outside of AA, which I'd attended for maybe about 2 months. She gave me her number. I think I communicated with her by text, but I never even knew her surname, you know. I didn't know anything about her. Didn't know where she lived, didn't know the name of her husband, didn't know the name of her kids. I wouldn't be able to find her because the only name that I had was Lindsay, you know. But this is one of the people that she was doing this to, was setting up accounts and trolling this Lindsay under my name. So that was why the police wanted me to have some kind of communications dispute or communications issues on record, so that they can then go to people in any environment I go to, and they can show these communications, you know, these probably vile communicate. They never showed me exactly what they were. They just kind of spoke as though they were particularly horrible, you know. And so I don't know exactly what was said, but they will show the people in the area, you know, these disgusting communications with this woman and the parents of a dead child and other people that I've known over the years whose numbers, contact details were in my phone, probably by email, probably by text, probably by phone, probably setting up fake accounts, you know, using my name, my Facebook that I never had access to, etc. And they'll be able to go to people and say, look, on record, she has a record for doing this. She has form. Because I'd sent shitty messages to her ex, and she has form for doing this. And look, this is what she does. She goes around trolling people. So that was the need of the police to kind of set this, you know, this communications arrest up, was so that they could kind of play into this whole narrative that I'm someone who goes about trolling people online, you know, all the while that it's this network, the police who work alongside the police, that were doing this. So again, that's why they use the yellow, you are low, because apparently I do these things. I don't actually, but I mean, you are all low, so there we go. Anyway, that's my long-winded, probably understandable explanation. Take care, God bless, lots of love.